Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video we're going to cover rendering in Maya using the Arnold Rendering Engine. We're going to be working with objects that we developed in Rhino and imported to Maya. These were developed with this object was developed using the shrink wrap tool, and we also have a backdrop that we imported. We set up everything, organized everything onto layers, and prepared the objects for rendering in a previous video, so check that video out if you missed it. Okay, so we're ready to render, and we can start our rendering by clicking the render the current frame icon here under the menu items. And Maya should have the Arnold Rendering Engine enabled by default. And because I'm recording this video, the rendering engine is running a little slow and it's popping up on the other screen, so I'm going to pause the video and then bring it over. Okay, so this is what you should see, the Arnold render view. And before we start fixing our rendering, which is now just a black frame, we want to go ahead and dock it here in between the outliner and the modeling view. And this workspace is very convenient for organizing and setting up your rendering. We can save this workspace up here under General, save current workspace as, let's say, rendering, or my rendering, something like that, hit OK. And now we can very easily up here toggle between General or my rendering. And this general would be for modeling and rendering for organizing and rendering. Okay, so right now we have just a black frame here, and that's because we don't have any any lights in the scene. Plenty of objects, no lights. So how do we get a light into the scene? Let's go to Arnold, Lights, and we are going to put in a Skydome light. And let's hit render again and see what happens. Again, I may pause this video while the rendering starts. It's a little bit slower as I'm recording. Okay, and as you can see here, we now have a Skydome light in our scene that's casting some light, and we can now actually look at our objects in the rendering view. What I will note is that this is you should note that this is a live link. A live link, as long as you have the play button enabled. So we can stop this, but while this is active, it's just going to constantly be updating the rendering as I move around in Maya. And that's cool. So I'm going to toggle off the backdrop here so I can see just the objects. And the next thing I want to do is maybe fix the aspect ratio. In the rendering, I have this letterbox format, and obviously over here I have a very different format. So it'd be helpful to see what I'm actually going to get in the rendering. I can do that first of all by putting on a safe frame or a gate, and I activate that here in View. And let's go to camera settings, and we can turn on the resolution gate, and that's going to show me exactly what will be rendered in my rendering view. But let's say I don't like this proportion or this resolution. I want this to be square, let's say. I can change that up here under the render settings. So display render settings. This pops up. And now under Common, I can scroll down and change the rendering resolution. So there's some presets here. I'm just going to go ahead and dial this in manually. So like 1200 for height or width, and let's make it square, 1200 by 1200. And it would be good to get the proportion that we want here, and then we can always increase this resolution for a final rendering. Now I'm going to zoom out with my scroll wheel here in the render view, and then middle mouse button pants, and now I've got the whole rendering framed in this view, and now I can move over here. And what I see on this side will be matched in this rendering view. Okay, great. So that's the first step, and this is already something because we are getting we're getting our object showing up. But how would we maybe get better shadows? Right now, this looks more like an ambient occlusion rendering. To get shadows, we can go ahead and activate our Skydome light. So let's select the Skydome light and then select the attribute editor. This is where I could change the color of the light coming in. So right now, Arnold is just using the Skydome to cast a solid color into our scene. That color is white, but of course we could change it to yellow. And then the other thing I've noticed is if we change it back to white, the default white for Arnold is a little bit gray. So if you click the eyedropper here, and maybe there's nothing really white in our scene, but let's see if we even do that, like go into the Maya logo here. Let's see what that's going to do it. Let's try that. And then go back to here. Let's see, go to white again. This is not working. Color wheel. How did I get this before? Yes, we need to get a brighter white. And so how do we do that? Let's try something else here. Okay, so now I have this object over here. Let's try this. Go back to color, picker, and then I go to white here. Is that going to work? Yeah, so that gave us, okay. It's very weird. I don't know why, but if you want a very bright white, we have to actually go through this weird process of finding a white object in Windows or something in Maya itself, and then actually grabbing that. So just be aware of that. And then we can dial down, once we have like that super bright white, we can always go back and get a more gray white. So see the difference? Now we have that like very bright white, which we got with a color picker, and I just grabbed it from something on my Windows desktop. And now we have this gray color. So I don't know why that is, but we have that saved here now if we want a bright white. And now we can also, experiment with colors and, get a tint just very simply by playing with that. Okay, I'm going to go back to the sort of default grayish white here, and let's now, so how we can use a Skydome instead. So let's bring this back over here. Let's add the physical sun and sky, and we do that if we decide we don't want just a color, but also this more advanced option. We can click the checker pattern here, and this is going to give us access to render nodes. And some of them are Maya nodes by default, and some of them are Arnold nodes. Most of the Maya nodes, or maybe all of the Maya nodes, work with Arnold, but Arnold nodes don't necessarily work with the Maya rendering engine, which I believe is now just Viewport 2.0. So we want to find the physical sun and sky texture, and we can find that under texture, environment, AI, physical sun and sky, or you can just grab Arnold and type sky, and then we'll find AI physical sky, and you can see, aha, it is putting a sky into our background here. So I'll rotate this a little bit over here, and you can see that there is a horizon line, there's a ground color, and we can change all of that here. So the part of it is, let's see how the ground color you would change with this. The turbidity is going to be the clarity of everything. So you could dial that down, might not see a big difference. And then the sky tint, if you wanted things to have like a bluish tint, for example, you could click this and then start making that a little bit less blue here, so you could change the type of light that's being cast in the scene. If you wanted the sun to have a yellowish tint, you could click that there and then kind of bring that up. So that will make things a little bit warmer if you choose. I'm just going to hit undo for that. I'm not sure what the sky tint is by default, but I could also just make that more of a kind of bright white there, and that will get rid of the tint. So the sun tint. I now have just a little bit of sky tint on the object. or in the on the sky, and no tint for the sun. And I can always come back and change these settings. To jump back into the Skydome light, I can just click it in the outliner. And then to find the physical sun and sky settings, I can, in the Skydome light, come to the color and click where I put that channel in. And now I can go back and modify these settings. Okay, so let's look at the Skydome light, and let's also turn our backdrop back on so we can see the effects of that. So now we have our backdrop on. We can see that we have a very sharp shadow here, and this is an improvement over our other rendering because we didn't have any shadows. So let's do a couple of things here. First, let's make, I've got my backdrop on reference. I want to go ahead and select it, hit the R key, and I'm going to scale it out so I don't see the sky when I'm zoomed in on the object. So let's see if I might have to fix that up here. I could also just shrink my object down, or I could make my backdrop a little bit bigger, but let's just say that's going to be fine. And now I can zoom in on my backdrop. Okay, so the rendering's looking really dark right now, and let's fix that by going to the Skydome light, and we can, let's see here, in the attribute editor, change the intensity. So let's change this to something like 4. Okay, and that starts to improve our rendering. 5, we could look at 5, now it gets brighter. Okay, so now we're getting brighter rendering here. Okay, so now let's change the shadow, where the shadow is. And we could do this in a couple of ways. We could either, in the Skydome light, come back to the physical sun and sky, and we should be able to, like, we could change the azimuth of the sun and rotate it around that way. So that's one way we can do it, and that's not a bad way. We could then make the shadows longer by probably, let's see, reducing the elevation of the sun. You can see it's also changing the lighting quality a little bit. So it's going to get a little bit darker, almost like, sunrise or dusk, as we reduce that elevation. And then as we dial it up, it's getting more like noon, and then and the shadows will be shorter. So that's a good place to adjust things. There's another way we could tweak it. One is if we, let's say, have the general angle right, and we want to tweak it on the fly, and we're not in here, let's come back to the Skydome light. We can also select the Skydome light itself, hit the E key for rotate, and then as we rotate the Skydome light, we are not necessarily changing the azimuth of the sun, but we're just rotating the whole Skydome light around. So you can do it that way too. And I don't know if there's a better way, just whichever way makes sense to you. So now our rendering's looking pretty good here. If I zoom in on it a little bit, let's see. We've got a bluish tone. Maybe we want to go ahead and increase the intensity even more. Let's make it a little bit brighter. Okay, so that's nice. We can also then, if we don't like this bluish tone, we can just come back to the sun and sky, the sky tint here, and we could, sky tint, where did you go? And so again, I'm in the physical sun and sky, hitting the sky tint, and then I could either change the color, so I could do that, so you can see that I'm changing the tint of the image this way. So that's one way. You can just change it, maybe undo and get it back to blue. Skydome light. Sometimes it takes a minute. Okay, now I'm back to blue. Go back to this. I was just hitting undo. Okay, sky tint, let's go back to that tint. And then if I just want to get rid of the tint altogether, I should be able to bring this value up to 0. And then same with the sun tint, should all be 0. Could also, we have this bright white, we could click that for our sun tint, and then we could always dial it down. So I guess it gives us a little bit of gray to begin with, so our images don't get completely washed out. But then we can start playing with that. So you can see the sky tint's a little bit of gray here. Let's see what happens if we make that also just a very bright white. So now you can see that we have that, and then we might kind of dial it down to gray. So so we have quite a bit of flexibility here, depending on what kind of tone we want in our image. We could also use this Skydome light in with other lights, but I think that's actually better to do with an HDRI image, and so we could do that in the next video, show how to put in light and make an HDR, link up an HDRI. Okay, yeah, let's do that. And then I'm also going to do a little video in between that shows how we can change the color of our backdrop here. Because if I turn, or I'm sorry, just make our background a solid color, because right now, if I go back to, let's see, the channel box and turn off our backdrop, I can see the sky and ground here. And maybe that's something that we want, but maybe we would like to just have a solid color back here. So let me show you how to do that in a little mini video, which will be up next. Thanks for watching.